Dear friends, you're very welcome again. In the first session that we did, we looked at the courtroom drama of John's Gospel, where John puts before us, the jury, his case, so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing this, you may have life in his name. In the second session, we looked at the great witness the evangelist calls into the witness box, the woman of Samaria. And she's a wonderful witness. After all, she's already converted half a town. People who would have looked at her with hostility. So she's a great witness. And in this session, the man born blind will be approached by Jesus and healed by him. And he will now come to the witness box and testify before you who Jesus is and invite you to look at him, as he says, before I met him, I was blind. Look at me now, I can see. Before approaching the gospel text itself, I'd like to approach this a little differently. Two types of distinct literature, the biblical narrative and the fairy tale, share a teaching that sometimes it's the least likely candidate who's chosen for an important task. Often it's the one who's overlooked by many who actually inherits the kingdom. Once upon a time there was an ancient couple who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Simpleton. He was despised and mocked for his crushing stupidity, the poor soul. Simpleton is compared to his discredit with his stronger and more intelligent brothers. By the end of the story, however, it is Simpleton who has won the hand of the princess. It's Simpleton who inhabits the beautiful castle. It's Simpleton who inherits the kingdom. In the world of the fairy tale, it is usually the least expected candidate, like the famous Cinderella, who wins in the end. In many stories, the least likely candidate is often the youngest son in the family, who is seen to be less worthy and less deserving compared to his elder brothers. He's innocent of their worldly wisdom and strength and cunning. He's the psychological summary of all that is fragile and marginal, and his chances of success in life are regarded as flimsy at best. Yet he is the one who wins the hand of the princess and inherits the kingdom and makes his home in the castle. And he does this not because he follows a self-improvement course on how to succeed with nothing going for you, but because something happens to him. He is chosen to succeed. Chosen to succeed by those who see more to him than meets the eye. His success is not due to his native effort, but to the fact that he's chosen and helped by others who have special powers. In the first reading assigned to the liturgy of Lent that celebrates the man born blind, we hear how the prophet Samuel is commissioned by God to choose an unlikely successor to King Saul. Samuel is sent to Jesse of Bethlehem to anoint one of his 8 sons as the future king of Israel. Samuel is impressed by the eldest son and presumes that this young man of great height will surely be God's choice. But no. The prophet learns God does not see as man sees. Man looks at appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart. Jesse presents 7 of his sons to the prophet. It doesn't occur to him that his youngest son tending sheep out in the fields might be vaguely suitable. After all, he's only a young shepherd boy. None of the 7 comes up to expectation, so number 8, the forgettable one, is called in from the hills. The Lord sees in David something more than meets the eye. David, the youngest, is chosen. And this young shepherd boy is God's eccentric choice to be future king. In our chosen gospel from John, a blind beggar is chosen by Jesus to be our teacher. Here we have another example of God's choice, one which confuses the religious leaders of the day. We see a blind beggar who becomes a theologian. John's beautifully crafted story tells how a blind man comes to see the light in Jesus, both physically and spiritually. When Jesus' disciples first see the blind man, they presume that his affliction is a result of sin. Interestingly, they show no interest in helping the man, but having a seminar about the cause of his condition. Jesus has no interest in seeing this man as a theological puzzle. Jesus sees in the blind man something else. This roadside beggar, who has always inhabited a world of darkness, will be chosen to be the one to display the work of God and point to who Jesus really is. Jesus does not merely reject prejudices regarding those people who are physically challenged. He affirms the human dignity of the person by asserting that the individual's apparent disability is actually a grace, an opportunity for the works of God to be made visible through him. The fact that Jesus notices the blind man is in itself remarkable. People tend to pass by beggars without seeing them because it's painful to see misery, to witness a man or a woman so far gone there seems no hope of restoration. This man has become part of the background of misery, a fixture in the landscape. But Jesus has eyes educated to notice the little people and to attend them. Jesus knows that healing this man on the Sabbath will bring greater opposition from the religious leaders who already want to silence him. His compassion for the man is more important than his own survival. This blind man, unlike the blind man in Luke's Gospel, is not shouting out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." It is Jesus who takes the initiative and approaches the blind man. Jesus makes a paste with clay and spittle, then commands him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. This took remarkable faith on the part of the blind man. Jesus does not promise to heal his blindness. Still, as a blind man, his eyes now covered in mud, the poor soul has to find his way down to the pool of Siloam and then down its steps to the pool itself. But he follows the word of Jesus. And he comes back seeing. This is the first time in the whole sweep of the biblical narrative that a person born blind is healed of their blindness. From Genesis to John's Gospel, no prophet, no priest, no apostle has ever given sight to someone born blind. As this blind man will point out, since the world began, it has never been heard of that anyone opened the eyes of someone born blind. When the blind man is healed, he returns to his home. John's scene now expands to include the neighbours, the Pharisees, the man's parents, and Jesus himself, all captured beautifully in Paolo Veronese's painting. He packs them all into one scene in this painting. The healed man's surprised neighbours check their memory. Some refuse to believe their eyes. They are unwilling to let this new event interfere with their fast memories, in spite of the man's protests when he shouts out, "I am the man." How do you get some people to believe that you're real? He doesn't claim any special knowledge of the one who cured him, but identifies him simply as the man called Jesus. Remember, he's not yet seen Jesus. The Pharisees have their seminar too, and there is a division among them. Some are doubtful that given who Jesus is, he could produce such a sign. Others are sure that given the sign he produces, he cannot be sinful. But as some Pharisees grow more blind, the former blind man grows in insight, and now he identifies Jesus as a prophet. This is not a welcome development, and the man's parents are hauled in as prospective allies in the case against Jesus. They state that their son is old enough to speak for himself. They know for sure the truth about their son's former blindness, but they refuse to commit themselves because they're afraid of being expelled from the synagogue. They know for sure the truth about their son's former blindness, but they refuse to commit themselves because they are afraid of being thrown out of the synagogue. Let their son speak for himself, and speak for himself he does. He's the perfect witness because he refuses to deny his own experience. I only know I was blind. Now I can see. He soon realizes that he will be listened to only when his testimony confirms the prejudice of his interrogators. But rather than frighten him, this knowledge frees him to develop his evaluation of Jesus as a man of God. He does this so well that he annoys his listeners who refuse to be enlightened by the likes of this simpleton. The price he pays for witnessing to Jesus is excommunication. After the Pharisees grow impatient, the man retorts with a wonderful line. Why do you want to hear my testimony again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Like he is. With this line, John captures the defiant and unwavering faith of the man born blind. He doesn't care what anyone thinks. He simply testifies to the truth. In that sense, he is a wonderful witness for the evangelist's courtroom drama. The authorities drive him away, but Jesus seeks out this budding theologian and reveals himself to him. Now the rejected man is the only one who sees Jesus as the Son of Man. Only gradually does the blind man emerge from his world of darkness. Only gradually does he grow faith in Jesus. The former blind man shows a gradual increasing awareness of who Jesus is. You can see it on the board. Jesus is a man, then Jesus is a prophet, then Jesus is my master, I am his disciple. Jesus is a man of God, then Jesus is the Son of God. and Jesus is the one I worship. Dear friends, both the story of the young shepherd David and the story of the blind man speak to us of God's choices, because God sees the heart. God chooses differently from the way that we do. Both the young shepherd David and the blind man are remembered and celebrated by the Christian community. Why? Because they point beyond themselves to the reality of the divine. We honor David as the one who ultimately points to the Son of David. We honor the man born blind as the one who points to the Son of Man, who is the light of the world. Dear friends, we have been elected to display God's work. In our baptism, we've been chosen to point to Jesus by the witness of our Christian lives. To many people, including ourselves, we may seem an unlikely choice. But our greatness is in the fact that we have been chosen, not in ourselves alone. Allowing God to work in us, we can keep alive the story of God's eccentric choices. Dear friends, I have a few questions for you, but you might come up with more interesting ones yourselves. The first one, in the other Gospels, Jesus heals various people. That's it. What is the difference in this healing story from John's Gospel? The man born blind, now healed, becomes braver and more audacious. Why do you think that is? Why does the evangelist John give him so much space in his Gospel? And thirdly, why do you think that some people refuse stubbornly to believe in the obvious goodness of Jesus? Why? We'll finish with the prayer. For the universal church, for all those who have been anointed in the name of Christ, that goodness and kindness shall follow them all the days of their life. We pray to the Lord. For all those who live in the darkness of sin and who cannot see the light, that the Lord will give them a new heart to discover right living and truth. We pray to the Lord. For those who are afflicted by doubt and perplexity, that they may see God's light in Jesus and learn to walk humbly by faith in him. We pray to the Lord. And for this community of faith, that the Lord will anoint us anew in the power of the Spirit, that we can serve him with our whole heart and mind. We pray to the Lord. May the Lord grant us the faith and the sight to see him and to love him, so that in our turn we might witness to his glory. Amen.